My name is Dame Stephanie Shirley. I'm probably the oldest interviewee you've ever had here because I actually started in computing in the 1950s and I'm in the National Museum of Computing, so I'm a museum piece. I love being described as the original woman in technology because I'm very proud of my gender, and I've been the first woman this, the only woman with that for a long time, and technology is where I come from and what I do. Like many women, I started in business for very negative reasons. The family culture was very much for public service, but I found that I was meeting the glass ceiling in the early days and really went into business in order to provide an environment where women in particular could thrive, could have an environment where they did not feel like second-class citizens, and where I myself would enjoy working. And that is precisely what I did. Life then was pretty sort of macho. The management style of the day was very much command and control. And women wanted to work in a much more collegiate way. And in particular, women with children found it quite difficult to work in the flexible way in the corporate world. And so my company was just, I think the minute number 1 in the annals of the company said it was the employment policy to have jobs for women with children. It was a real crusade. And then as I learned a bit more about how important training was, that turned into careers for women with children. And later still, I learned that a lot of women were looking after elder care or disabled partners, and it became for careers for women with dependents. And it remained like that for 13 years until, and it was a crusade. People laughed at me because software at that time was given away free with the hardware. And in any case, you couldn't have a woman running a sort of serious financial services type company. But equal opportunities legislation came in. And of course, I was delighted. This was just the sort of thing I thought the country needed. But it meant that the pro-female policy that we'd been using all those years was illegal. And so we had to let the men in if they were good enough, and gradually the company became properly balanced between the sexes, which is as it should be. Well, when software really started, it was sort of wrapped up together with the hardware, and when people bought a computer, the software was already there. So all the software was always tailor-made. And my software house, and people laughed about it, that I should think of trying to sell something like software, which was free. But when we got commissions to write the software for the black box flight recorder for Concorde, for scheduling buses in Wallasey, for payroll for the Mars chocolate company. These were really major tasks that took many teams, and they were tailor-made. So we really started to have, and we remained tailor-made. We only had one product in all the years, and that failed. Life was very different then, and it was on a slower pace. When we wrote software, I would sit at a table with pencil and paper, with a little sort of writing flow charts to try and define what the job was that was necessary. And when at long last that was converted into code, which might be machine code, or it might even be binary, it would then be sent off to a data center where somebody would punch it onto punch cards or paper tape. A second person would then repunch it to verify that the punching was correct. And then finally, it would actually be submitted to the computer. And our schedules for delivering software were based on 2 such turnarounds a week. You know, so it's quite a different sort of thing. And I used to get a stomachache when I was going on the computer because it cost £1 a minute, which was a phenomenal amount of money in those days. find it extraordinarily disappointing that, having struggled so hard for women's opportunities in this particular and exciting science, that so few women should choose to go into the sector today. The percentages not even going up. When I think that programming started, it came out of the clerical area for the programming bit, and so it was an all-woman's job until the men realised that this was quite interesting, quite well paid, and they wanted to get in. And I believe the problems start very early on. I opened the Women in Computing Gallery some months ago and learned there that the National Museum of Computing, which has masses and masses of school parties going around, they have 33 school boys going around to every one school girl. And so very early on, somehow the stage is set somehow for computing to be considered as a nerdy thing, whereas in fact it's very exciting. You're working with the general public, you're working with marketing people, you're working with finance and design. I could not imagine a better career for women. It's flexible, it's well paid, you can do it as and where you like. You can work remotely with somebody in Japan. You can Skype to people if you actually want to see them. It is so ideal for people to be working of both genders. The main thing that stops women performing is their own choice. They don't want to pay the cost of success. I was very lucky. Eventually, I made a lot of money. And just to put the scale of it, it was 150 million. And I don't really, what do you do with money like that? I have a learning disabled child, so I wasn't going to travel or anything like that because I was looking after him. And you soon realize that what money gives you is freedom and choice. And you can only, as the saying goes, eat one hot dinner a day. I'm thrilled to have set up several charities and taken them into sustainability. It's quite easy to set up a business. The thing is to make it stable and long-lasting. And my little company, after 45 years, employed 8,500 people. And it took a long, long time to sort of get that stability into it. Same with charities. My first charity my son was the first resident in the first home of that first charity, and he was autistic. And that took me 17 years to get into sustainability, independent of me financially and managerially. The next charity, which was a school, a big school, Priors Court School near Newbury, that took me only 5 years. The medical research charity, Autistica, which I'm largely working on now, that took about the same sort of time and is just getting independent of me. And that's what's so exciting. It's very creative. It's like a work of art that it's not particularly clever. You do have to be clever and you do have to work hard, but it's the being able to get a team working together and sticking at it through the problems. Any fool can run an organisation when the economy is good and everything's going fine. It's when things go wrong and how you recover. And I'm remembered for my successes, but in fact I've had lots of failures and I've just sort of learnt to, oh well, brush myself down and on with the next one. 15% of my charitable work is actually in the field of IT, because I give to things that I know and care about. And there are only two really, and that is IT as my professional discipline, and autism, my late son's disorder. I got on very early with a virtual city to help autistic people walk around the city and how to get a seat on a bus and basic things that other kids pick up without having been taught. In 1999, I did one of the first virtual conferences on autism, and that was attended by 165,000 people from 45 countries. So, you know, those sorts of things. But I have also given to IT companies themselves. I was very involved with the Worshipful Company of Information Technologists, the IT livery company, number 100 in the livery company pecking order. And I'm very proud of that. And that does a lot of charitable work as well. I'm currently engaged with an Australian company that's working here in the field of education for autistic pupils, young and old, which basically converts speech to text, because people with autism learn visually rather than orally. And when you've got something in writing, you can go back to it. You don't have to ask, I missed that. And that's really making quite a difference to the education of pupils with autism. In my school, people are using tablets. Amazing, these are children without speech, but they're using tablets. Really very, very exciting. What I've learned is that I don't really do anything. Nobody does anything by themselves anymore. It is all a matter of teamwork. And so the building of teams and being able to work collegiately is much more important than IQ or anything else that you'd like to think of. One of the projects I did a couple of years ago was to actually write my autobiography. And I call it a memoir because it's not terribly factual, it's how I felt about things and so on. And my motivations in life go back to my early childhood, as most people's do. And the title, Let It Go, refers to the strength that you get from letting things go, moving from the command and control management to a more cooperative, collegiate way of operating, moving from I can do this much better than you to sort of saying, well, I find this very difficult. I wonder if you could help me do it. And that works very much better. So let go is a sort of almost a metaphor for the pleasure that I've got from letting all my money go. And I've taken more pleasure from giving it away than I ever did making that money. It took me 31 years, I think. But, and I did enjoy business, but the pleasure that you get from letting something go is great. It links back to my childhood because I had a traumatic childhood and my dear mother let me go. We were living in Dortmund near Berlin at a time of horrendous discrimination, and she did a very brave thing, really. She put me on a Kindertransport and sent me to England from, in fact, it was Vienna, into the arms of strangers in order to save my life from the Nazis. And so, as all Jewish children, where we arrived, I was with my oldest, clutching the hand of my older sister, who was all of 9. We arrived stateless, penniless, and of course without a word of English. And the trauma of that 2.5-day journey was, I mean, a trainload of 1,000 children with only 2 adults. And there's a bit that I always like to mention, that there were some babies as well as the children who were aged 5 to 16. But there were some young girls looking after some babies as well. And those girls were not eligible to come out on the Kindertransport, but had volunteered to bring out the babies and then return to what they must have known was almost certain death. And I always like to honour those young people because I think it was terrific at 16, 17, 18 to do that. But the trauma of that has really made me realise that tomorrow is going to be very different. It's nothing like today, certainly nothing like yesterday. And to cope with change. And eventually I came to welcome change. Since I work in the high-tech area where it's always different, it's always something new, that stood me in good stead.